Hello everyone, my name is Bhante Wade Buripanyo here at Empty Cloud Monastery for this evening's monk chat. Very fortunate to be joined by the newly ordained Ayawata, and everyone is happy to see him as well. Um, Recently had not only ordination of Ayawata as a bhikkhu, but Aya Satima as ordained as a bhikkhuni on the 19th of October, and then our Katina here at Empty Cloud on the 27th of October, a very festive and enjoyable time. And we're joined here for monk chat by three lay guests as well, who are taking advantage of Empty Cloud's lay residency program to deepen their practice and live by the monastic routine. And as I said, we're doing monk chat this evening, which is an opportunity for you to type in any questions you may have on the subject of Buddhism, and we'll do our best to answer them. And I see we've got a number of people typing in, sending in Anjali's and comments and many questions already. And so perhaps we should go ahead and get started. Yeah, should we?
I see. I'm sorry. Okay. I was going to say I see Torah here.
Well, Torah's there as well.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Hello, Torah. Proud Taikwa.
I believe that's Torah.
Great to see you. And many other familiar names as well. Got Karuna and Joe Hammond, I noticed as well. Welcome to both of you. And some new names to me as well. Welcome to you as well. Mary is here also. Hello. And I said maybe we should go ahead and get started. And to start, by tradition, we chant the Namo Tassa first. Okay, so we can do that. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. All right. Well, why don't we find our first question and see if we can give them an answer.
Okay, it looks like we have a question, but it looks like it's in several parts.
Okay. Right.
Would you like me to read, Ajahn, or would you like to read?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a question from Joseph Hammond, who says, "Warmest greetings, Venerables." And he says, "Much piti arose today studying the Morning Sutta, Pubanha Sutta, AN 3.155. And he's quoting the sutta that says, 'Those who do good things in the morning by way of body, speech, and mind have a good morning.' It is so simple and so sweet. I was looking at some of the Pali words and would like to ask for your feedback on contemporary interpretations of the Pali." Okay, then there's this Pali verse he's quoted from the sutta, which is also chanted as a
Yes.
blessing, I believe, Sunakatang, Sumangalang, etc. He says, "How do you feel about interpreting phrases such as this Supabhatang, blessed dawn, fresh start, and Sukhano, great timing, as in it's always great timing and you always start fresh doing good deeds?" Okay, then he has some other questions, but maybe we would limit it to there for now, Ajahn. I'm not sure how you feel.
Take kind of one at a time.
Okay.
Yeah. So, well, you, I hardly know any Pali at all, and Ayawata I think knows a lot more about Pali than I do. So, we invite you if you're inclined to address this.
Okay, well, I'm no Pali expert, but looks like you're asking about kind of creative translations, if that's okay. You say on contemporary interpretations. So how does interpreting blessed dawn as fresh start and Sukhano as great timing? I think that's, I mean, from a Dhamma perspective, you could say it's okay to interpret it that way, I believe. I mean, I would say a good moment, you could also say, we'd call that great timing in English, or an auspicious moment, we say, oh, it's great timing, it's good timing. That's another way of phrasing that. And blessed dawn, you could say, yes, symbolically dawn stands for kind of the start. And so fresh start. The only thing that maybe personally I would say is I wouldn't want to maybe translate, if you were translating the text for somebody, I would let them know that it doesn't actually say fresh start, it says blessed dawn, but this is a kind of interpretation you've taken as a sort of symbol from what you feel it's trying to say in a deeper way, maybe in a more colloquial, idiomatic English phrasing. So that's the only caveat I would say, is I would say if translating, probably it's best to be clear. It's best to be translate what it says within idiomatic English. And then if you're explaining it, then maybe yes, to me, fresh start and great timing makes sense. I don't know if Arjun, you have another.
Sure. Yes. Yes. Of course, the Buddha is talking about if you do something good in the morning, then you have a good morning, and there are other sayings like that. I think in the Pali, like any day you do a good deed, it's like you've found a lucky star, and things like this, you know. And so the emphasis being that if we wonder what's really good in the world, it's skillful acts by body, speech, and mind. This is what's really good, and we could look to the stars, or we could look to to a crystal ball, or we could look to a lucky rabbit's foot, you know, or something like this, you know. Look to any variety of things for what's really good, you know. And skillful acts by body, speech, and mind are really the best. And so, anytime we do something that's good, then we should be happy about that, and we can expect there'll be good results from it. And so I think that's what he's trying to relate here. You know, there are others. I wonder if this is from the same sutta, but I think it may be from a different one. Where the Buddha is discussing some rituals that are common at the time. For example, which I remember very vaguely, having read it in one sutta, for example, where a man who followed some Brahmin teacher, as I believe, said he had the practice of first thing in the morning he would bathe, for example. And this would purify him. And the Buddha says, well, actually, this might clean your body. This won't purify you inside, you know. And you have to have spiritual practices for that. This is just one kind of example, you know. Another kind of example was a man said that if I as soon as I wake up, I touch the earth. I think it was something like that. If I don't touch the earth, then I go out and I look at the sun or something. He had a series of possible ritual activities he would engage in. If he did this, then that was his ritual. But if he didn't do that, then he would do the next thing. And it involved these kind of mundane things like touching the earth or various things like this, you know. And this was a good start off to the day, he thought. And the Buddha taught him differently about skillful acts of body, speech, and mind, you know, in one way or another. That this is what's truly good in the world. And the morning routines are. I've noticed that in my little bit of contact with popular culture now, that morning routines are. Everyone wants to know what's the best morning routine. How do I start off my day to have a really good day? You know, and maybe this is one to consider. You know, I think it's really good when we start off our day at that empty cloud. It is quite common in Buddhist monasteries with the puja to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. You know, this is considered very skillful. It says in the Dhammapada that however many gifts and offerings you may make over the course of an entire year, the merit would not match the merit of worshipping one who is consummate. And so we start off our day with a worship service for the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And we do some meditation, and we share merit, and so a series of really good actions, we feel. And it makes us feel good as we start off our day, and we've done some good karma, and the heart feels lighter is one of the immediate results. And so, so anytime you feel like you want to make a fresh start in life, as Joe is interpreting this phrase, it'd be a wonderful way to do it. Do some good karma of some kind or other, and say, I'm going to turn over a new leaf in some way or other in my life, or I want something new to happen in my life, and so I'm going to do some good karma, whether it's good karma you've done before or even a new kind of good karma, and then if you have faith in karma, then you can be happy that you're getting off on the right foot.
Just checking, okay. And then it looks like some other questions here about Pali. How would you interpret Suyitang Brahmachariso in a contemporary sense? So I believe that Suyutang Brahmacharisu, if I'm not mistaken, means a good offering, good sacrifice to a brahmacharya, to someone who leads the holy life or spiritual life. That's my understanding of what it means.
It's a good, I'm sorry, please repeat that. A good footstep?
A good sacrifice or offering.
Oh,
like
sorry.
in the passage on right view when it says there is what is given, sacrificed, and offered. I believe the yita, this is the, if I'm not mistaken, if I'm not mixing up my words, then I think this is kind of a sacrifice you would make to a spiritual practitioner,
Oh, I see.
like a fortunate one or a very auspicious sacrifice one might do or offering one might do.
Okay. This says making offerings to priests and contemplatives, or
Mm.
Brahmins and samanas and so on. Yes, okay.
Yes. So Joe asks, how would you interpret that in a contemporary sense?
Sure, right, okay, yeah. Because yes, the Buddha in general, he extols generosity, and it says in the suttas that even if you give something to an animal, that it will come back to you 100 times over. But then he talks also of giving specifically to support the religious people, religious seekers and priests and so on like this, and so I'm trying to remember if there's any special result or special reason that he talks about this, but of course, this enables us to have wonderful things like religion in our lives, and so I don't know if we need to if there would be a different interpretation in a contemporary sense for this. It's basically about supporting religious seekers and the clergy in one way or another, by making offerings to them. This kind of sacrifice, of course, sacrifice is sometimes used in the sutras to refer to when people made animal sacrifices, for example, slaughtering animals in sacrificial rites to gods, for example, or gods or celestial beings or something like this. But in the Buddhist sense, this wouldn't be the kind of sacrifice we'd make. Instead, we make sacrifices through giving. I think perhaps it's used in the suttas. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, or I wonder if you might remember that you can make the sacrifices through renunciation, by keeping renunciant precepts, for example, so on like this. But this would be about making materially supporting and performing acts of service in support of religious people, in order to be supportive of the religion, and their spiritual aspirations.
And maybe, Ajahn, I don't know if we can circle back to Joe's later questions if we have time after the other people's. Now that it's maybe 3 in a row.
I think it makes sense, yes. If Joe will understand, we'll try to take some questions from others, and if we have more time towards the end, we can circle back and answer some of these others. Thanks for your questions, Joe.
Okay, and Richard says, good evening. And he says, Ajahn Brahm says that if you can make peace, be kind, and be gentle, you can meditate. These are the 3 samma sankappas. How to use them in meditation?
Okay, the 3 samma sankappas meaning like right thought from the Noble Eightfold Path.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I believe by make peace, it's
Make peace.
be kind. It would be the non-aversion, and be gentle would be non-harming.
And be kind. So we're thinking, Richard, about how this relates to samma sankappa, which is the only definition I know from the sutras. The literal definition is thoughts of non-greed, non-aversion, and non-cruelty, or non-ill will and non-cruelty. I think is how it's usually translated. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So non-greed, non-aversion, and non-cruelty, or non-ill will and non-cruelty. And so these look like maybe they'd be positive aspects. Peace, kindness, and gentleness. And so I wonder what would be, don't know exactly how it would map to those 3. Which of these would be the opposite, for example, of greed, for example. Perhaps peace could be, because if greed is allayed, then we feel peaceful inside. It feels very good. But the initial inclination was to think that peace maybe meant the making peace with someone that you're having hard times with, being able to forgive and reconcile with them, or something like this, So there's a little bit of a discussion about what Sammasankappa is and thoughts about how these might relate to them. In terms of Sammasankappa and meditation, it's about these three kinds of defilements. And the Buddha said that when he was practicing, he realized that some kinds of thoughts and inclinations of mind are unskillful, and they lead to his harm. And others were skillful and led to his welfare. And so he said, well, what I'll do from now on then, having identified this, is I'll divide my thoughts into these two categories. I'll pay attention and classify them accordingly. And if I have a thought that's unskillful, or an inclination of mine that's unskillful, then I'll try to get rid of it. And if I have thoughts that are skillful, then I will try to further them and to follow them and to make use of them. And so the skillful thoughts were in the category of thoughts that are non-greed. They're not associated with this broad category of liking and wanting, especially for things like sensual pleasures, for pleasures of becoming, like accomplishing things, for example, in a worldly sense, and greed for non-becoming, like not wanting to do things and experience the results of doing things. Kind of going through this quickly, but that's about greed. So non-greed and non-ill will, so ill will towards others, or non-cruelty. Cruelty being is distinguished from ill will in the sense of having an interest in harming living beings, not necessarily because you have anger or hatred towards them, but simply for the pleasure of hurting someone. As a distinction. And so he says that non-greed, non-ill will, and non-cruelty, these are three kinds of thinking or mental inclination that are skillful. And so when we find ourselves in meditation, you might work with these in different ways depending on what type of meditation you're practicing. And actually this could turn into a potentially long discussion about how to do these, how to work with these. If one of the most common meditation methods, though, is breath meditation, a meditation method that's considered by the Theravada tradition to be suitable for all personality types. And so, if we're practicing breath meditation, we're focusing on the breath, and we find ourselves distracted by thoughts, especially that are unskillful, then we can notice this and think, that we want to let this go. We're not really interested in following these thoughts, and this isn't what we're trying to do right now. And so becoming aware with our mindfulness of these thoughts, and then letting go, just letting them go in one way or another, and then returning to your object, your main theme of meditation, in this case, the breath. Sometimes these kinds of thoughts may be persistent, or the mind might be very preoccupied with them, in which case we can simply remain mindful of them, as we might be mindful of the breath. And there are different ways of working with this, but one way is we can even think, to ourselves, thinking, kind of like we might do if we're counting the breath, or noticing that the breath is coming in and going out. Sometimes we use techniques like this to stay with our breath as a meditation object. We can do the same sort of thing with thoughts. In this way, not getting involved with them, and not getting caught up in them, but just letting them be as they are. They're impermanent, they're going to change and go away. And they're not self, they're not us and ours. And so we don't need to get caught up in them. And then when they either fade away or when the mind loses interest in them, return to the meditation object. This is a very, very simple kind of way of meditating in theory, and so easy to explain in a format like this. And that's one way of working with these. You also can look into things like if you are experiencing ill will, perhaps practicing loving kindness meditation, which is an antidote to ill will. Or if you're experiencing greed or lust, practicing recollection of things that are not beautiful, such as the unattractive aspects of the body. This is an antidote to greed and lust. These are some ideas.
Okay. Thank you, Ajahn. And we have a question from Robert. He says, do you believe that there is a higher occurrence of neurodivergent people as monks in the West than in the normal population? And he qualifies that as ADHD, autistic, etc. And if so, why do you think that might be?
Personally, I've only been back in the West. I went to Thailand and ordained in Thailand in 2014. But I have spent a total of about 3 or 4 years in monastic in monasteries in the West as a monastic. And my personal my hunch initially is that actually there's probably a lower occurrence of neurodivergent people as monks in the West than in the normal population. It's my personal belief. Wonder what you think, Aya, in your experience.
I think I have less experience than you, Ajahn, with meeting monastic communities, especially. But yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say I would. I definitely wouldn't say that I think there's more people with ADHD and autism. It's also maybe we can't obviously know unless they tell us or if it's. But I don't think that that's been my experience. I do think it's been my experience that I've met more people with maybe introverted tendencies or
Yeah.
maybe less social people, but I wouldn't
Yeah.
necessarily equate that with neurodivergence as you're defining it or kind of talking about it here.
Right, yeah. That I would definitely agree with. Introversion, yes. Naturally, for people who spend a lot of time studying, kind of as a vocation or meditating, is naturally going to be, I think, more suited to an introverted personality type. But I do know at least one extroverted personality type who's thrived as a monastic and has been in the ropes for many, many years. And there are many different roles for monastics. So I mentioned study and meditation, but some monastics, of course, are involved in quite a bit of teaching, and some even do more social work-oriented types of things. And so there are many different roles for monks. But I've tended to be in monasteries that are kind of focused more on meditation, and so I think the meditation monks tend to be more introverted. I think it's a good point. Yeah. I wonder anything else about personalities of monks. It might be of interest. I'm not sure to say off the top of my head, but. Yeah, so anyway, but yeah, relatively intellectual people, I think, by and large. So yeah, another personality trait of monks, I think, is a generalization.
There's maybe a majority, or maybe there's a higher than normal population in the monk population in the West in terms of people who have experience with drugs. To be quite frank,
Oh, okay.
I think I've heard from some people it's very rare to find a Western monk who hasn't taken drugs
Okay.
in the past, just because of the kind of some people they sort of semi-spiritual alignment that there can sometimes be there, especially
Right.
in a certain So
Right. Right.
I think that that's probably true.
Yeah, I bet you're right, and also it may be related to another one, a little more general characteristic of being relatively independent.
Mm.
Independent thinkers who are willing to do unusual things, such as ordained as monks, and so willing to really follow their beliefs, what they think is right, even to the great extent of ordaining. A very, very normal thing to do, ordaining as a monk in some cultures, such as in Thailand, where I ordained, but relatively unusual, of course, in the West, to ordain as a Buddhist monk. And so independent thinkers are willing to go their own way, march to the beat of a different drummer, you might say. Okay, yeah.
Okay, and then we have a question here from Mariah. How would you advise to interact with a person who is angry and confrontational? Complete avoidance is unfortunately not possible. Attempts to be neutral or kind do not seem to help.
Okay. Well, so this is, of course, every situation is unique, and so you have to use your wisdom, your intelligence and your savvy in each situation to work out what to do when it comes to details and talking in precise ways. But I think the most basic general thing is to, by Buddhist standards, is to not slip into unskillful actions of body, speech, and mind, as we were discussing before. It'd be quite normal for someone who's interacting with someone who's angry and confrontational, that you might become angry yourself or might become scared or anxious or frustrated or something like this, and then this might be a condition for doing something unskillful, like saying something harsh, or insulting, or for some people even engaging in violence, of course, and in some cases lying. And so we want to have the mindfulness to be aware of how this is affecting us internally, our own emotions, and have watch over our own actions, our actions of body and our speech, and what kinds of decisions we make, which is the actions of mind. Because even our decisions and our intentions are karma also. And so if we can review from time to time and recommit to our precepts, the moral principles we live by and believe in, this can help us to reaffirm, what our guidelines are for living, and then so when we have to interact with a person like this, we're less likely to slip into unskillful behavior. Another thing is that attempts to be neutral or kind. One thing to consider is that they do not seem to help, and I think one thing to consider is that they may not seem to be changing their behavior, at least so far as you can see in the present, but these efforts may be helping you internally. And I wonder if you stop and reflect on that, if you see whether that's true or not. For example, if we're practicing loving kindness for someone else, it may not change how they behave, but it may help us to feel better about the situation so that we don't feel as, for example, angry or anxious or frightened, about what's happening. And also less likely to do something unskillful. And so we look at these kinds of aspects of what these kinds of consequences of being at least remaining neutral, or being kind. Then we can see that actually there is benefit to this, and there are benefits also to being patient. When we practice patience, if we reflect on patience, remember to be patient, then this can bring up our patience. And every time we use this, and every time we're generous, and every time we practice loving kindness for someone else or even for ourselves, then we grow in these spiritual virtues, and then they'll be there for us, ever growing more strong. They'll be there for us next time we need them, and they'll be even better. And so we can think about this if we have faith in this, and see that this having to interact with someone who's angry and even confrontational can be an opportunity for spiritual development for yourself, and perhaps an opportunity to work through some karma that you may have with this person, from the past, in a way that you come out of it stronger and more spiritually developed than ever. And if we reflect also that this has to be impermanent, it's definitely going to change, and the situation will eventually come to an end. And you can definitely get through it, and as long as you use your savvy about how to interact with the situation and call upon other resources, your friends and your allies also, and see how to take care of yourself, that in the end you'll come out of this stronger and better than ever. And that's what I can offer, Ryan. I hope it goes well for you. I wonder if you have any advice also.
Thank you, Ajahn. That was nice. In terms of maybe what could I add to what Ajahn just thoroughly kind of explained? Maybe one thing that came to mind while he was speaking, which I think Ajahn, you touched on some, was in terms of maybe sometimes the tendency within us when we're interacting with difficult people to think like, how can I get them to change? And instead, we're turning the light back and kind of reflecting, and especially I think accepting like this person may never change. And I think also just reflecting could be helpful. If you just do a kind of exercise of imagining if you had to live the rest of your life and this person never changed and they were always angry, no matter what you did, no matter what you said. And that can maybe illuminate a little bit some of our attitudes. Like when we try to do skillful things, these subtle wishes and hopes of this will change them. And that's really where the problem is. It's in how they're treating me, not how I'm reacting to it. But the Buddha's teaching is no, it's not in how they're treating us. That's not where the problem is. It's in our mind. It's in how we experience it. And so I think if we reflect, like, there's no excuses. They'll always treat me like this forever and I can't escape it no matter what. Then that can force us to reflect that we actually are responsible for our emotional response to the situation. which can be easy to kind of slip out, even though we try to apply Buddhist strategies. So like Ajahn was saying, you can come out of this a more spiritually developed person, but sometimes we kind of want to avoid that to the best of our ability. So it can help if we just reflect and just kind of sit with our mind and tell it, like, no, there is no way out. We are 100% responsible for any emotional suffering that arises here. And we have to do that. And then I think also understanding that this is the Dhamma. So we can bow to the Dhamma, and even to this person inside of our mind, like, thank you so much, because this is reality and this is teaching me where my suffering is. So thank you so much for the Dhamma expressing itself to me in this way. And this is a way for me to see my mind. This is a way for me to understand. So the Dhamma is much higher than me. It's much higher than what I like or what I don't like. I don't like how this person treats me. Well, still, the Dhamma is better. So I'll bow to the Dhamma and I'll learn from this as best as I can. It's my responsibility, my karma. I'll learn from it. So I think that kind of attitude, like Ajahn was kind of alluding to, is maybe helpful. Because then you can feel less like the victim and more like, wow, this is the Dhamma right here and now I can practice. And I don't need to blame them anymore at all for any suffering I experience. So that's a kind of maybe a helpful reflection.
Sadhu. Great. Of course, stay safe. Use your savvy as well about staying safe and in all ways.
Yes. Okay, Rick has a question. It says, Venerables, can you talk about letting go, especially in regard to letting go of people, places, and things that have been important in our lives but may no longer serve our current or future needs?
Sure. Would you like to start?
Okay.
I started the last one. You started what?
So let's see, letting
I'll have to,
go
but if you want.
people, places, and things that have been important. Okay, well, so it sounds like maybe this is kind of touching on the problem of, if it's in terms of things, maybe on the problem of kind of the tendency to collect or hoard, right? Things that you say no longer serve our current or future needs. And I think when it comes to people and places, it might be a little bit more complicated to some extent, just because our attachment to people and places, we can't, do a garage sale for our friends or our hometown. So it's a little bit more complicated. But if it's in terms of things, it could be maybe a starting place if you work on your relationship to just external objects, and then kind of applying that little, like, baby steps, right? So if I can let go of these items, then maybe what does that feel like? What does that kind of energy in the mind, so to speak, of letting go feel like? And then maybe apply that also to loftier things like places or people. That's maybe one suggestion. And in terms of letting go of things, or how do you kind of lean towards that, maybe one reflection that comes up is you can reflect on the benefits of having little, the benefits of renunciation. So that way it's not like, oh, this is a chore, I have to do this because the Buddha says so, or because the monks told me so, or I feel obligated. But we really do things when we really like it, when we really want to, when we really feel that motivation. So if you reflect on the benefits of, oh, it feels so nice to be light and to not have all these things and these kind of emotional attachments, and that feels very nice and pleasant, and it helps me develop my practice. And maybe you can also practice generosity at the same time, like you can give things away, or you can even introduce people to new friends and so on. So maybe that kind of reflecting on the benefits of letting go and the joy of it, rather than the kind of pain of, oh, I have to let go of this. That's just a very simple idea that comes up.
That's great. Yeah. Reflecting on the benefits of relinquishment, and it's wonderful. Maybe a different tack also, because it can help to have different tools.
Yeah.
Maybe a different tack is would come from the suttas. And I'm thinking of the Anatta Lakkhana Sutta, the not self characteristic, and discourse on the not self characteristic. And the Buddha talks about how all of the five khandhas, they're impermanent, and being impermanent, they can't be ultimately satisfying. They can't satisfy us for forever, you might say. And that which is impermanent and unsatisfying is not us and ours. You know. And this is a reflection that I use personally, and maybe you'll find it helpful to reflect on that the people in our lives and the places in our lives and the material objects in our lives, our possessions, for example, were always inconstant and impermanent, you know. And it was never possible that they would be permanently satisfying to us. You know. And because of this, you know, if we think about this, that which is impermanent, you know, eventually we're always to be parted from all of these things. One reflection the Buddha gives us in the 5 subjects for frequent recollection is that everything that is dear and pleasing to me will change and be separated from me. And this was always the nature of all these things, all the people, places, and things in our lives. And so they were never really ours. In an ultimate sense, they're never really us and ours. And I mentioned us because we also have a tendency to identify with these things, but they're not us, and they're also not ours, not our possessions. And this is a methodology that the Buddha gave us for letting go, and so we can reflect on this and think through it a bit with these things. And especially once we make the mind calm in meditation, this kind of a contemplation will have more impact. It'll go down deeper into the heart, have more of an effect. And slowly over time, contemplating in this way, we'll let go more and more. That's another idea for you. Good. All right. Getting into the reality of the situation. Okay. There you go.
Nicola asks, when you take on the monk lifestyle, do women try to defer you with seduction?
Okay. So let's see. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The first noble truth, the truth of dukkha, there's suffering. You know? Which is true. There are all kinds of different kinds of suffering in life, and it reminds me of the story of the Buddha trying to attain enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And the popular legend that's come down to us over time is that first Mara, you know, tried to attack him with an army, and he tried to convince also the Buddha that he didn't have the spiritual virtues necessary to attain enlightenment. But the Buddha was able to overcome this, and then with the aid of the earth goddess. Okay. And then the next chapter in the story is that, or the next scene in the story is that Mara sends his 3 daughters to try to seduce the Buddha. And they have this in a sutta, actually. And his 3 daughters try a number of tricks to try to seduce the Buddha away from attaining enlightenment. And but they're not able to move him from his seat, his meditation seat. And he does succeed in attaining enlightenment. So. So it does happen sometimes that to be frank and honest, it does happen sometimes that women seek a boyfriend or a fiancé who's a monk, and they'll even go into the monastery looking for monks and see if they can you know, make contact with them and this kind of thing. Thinking that in some cases, well, the monk, if he's a monk, he must be a really good person, and wouldn't he be a wonderful husband, for example? This kind of thing does happen. Sometimes also it seems that women will test monks to see, well, these monks they say they keep all these precepts and so on like this, and they act so. They act like they're so good, you know. I wonder if I could, what would happen if I you know, tried to get a rise out of him or something like this, you know. Would he take the bait, you know? And so they may test the monks a bit. This kind of thing has been talked about, and of course, you know, it's hard to know what the intention of the lady is. So, but these kinds of things do happen, and so. So the monks in these situations, they have to just remember why they got into the monkhood in the first place, and what benefits they get from it, and try to be mindful of what's happening internally when these kinds of situations arise. You know.
Okay, I see a question here from maybe Joram or Joram. It says,
Not sure we can
Actually-
quite understand this.
Oh, I'm sorry. This actually
It's
looks.
It looks like, yeah, so Jorum's written in some comments or some questions perhaps, but it's hard to
Okay.
make sense out of them.
Yeah, it looks like it's
for
not
us
very.
anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, Joram, if you have another question that's written more clearly, we might be able to address it. Christina has a question, which I would summarize here as, how does merit work?
So, how does merit work? Okay, right. So, I'm trying to think of what is the Theravadan explanation for how merit works. My understanding is that different schools of Buddhism have different explanations. Although I haven't studied the teachings of other schools of Buddhism. I wonder if Ayawada might be able to shed some light on that. But and so one of the basic ideas of merit is that skillful actions of body, speech, and mind are meritorious. And what this means is good actions, as defined by Buddhism, will bring us pleasant results. Okay. Whereas bad actions will bring us unpleasant results. So, for example, generosity will bring us good results in the future, results that we'll like. For example, making acts of generosity will bring to us in return the material requisites we need for life. It also will help us to build our spiritual virtues internally. So we develop spiritually this way. And also, keeping moral precepts is good karma. It's meritorious. So, for example, undertaking the precept to not kill or to not harm living beings is very meritorious. And to break that precept by killing living beings or harming them is demeritorious, and so it means it'll bring us suffering in the future. Then the mechanics of how this works, I'm trying to think if I know of a teaching from the Orthodox school, the Theravadan Orthodoxy about exactly how does this happen, and I don't recall a teaching. There's a teaching within the meditation lineages of Thailand that the way it works is that the heart, which is actually quite vast and has many powers, of which we're mostly unaware, actually knows the consequences of actions and brings about those consequences, actually working in concert with the hearts of other living beings as well, as we're related to others through our karma. And so there's a spiritual aspect to life that we don't see with the physical eye. That we see the physical manifestations of things, and we see how we are able to manipulate the physical universe around us, but we don't see that actually underlying it is the spiritual aspect. The heart itself is also forming formations according to our karma and our merit. So I can offer that for an explanation. I wonder if you could offer any other from your studies of other schools, Theravadan or otherwise. I wonder if you might know of any, or how
Well,
merit works.
I do know that this was, I believe it was a big debate in different Buddhist schools.
Okay.
But I don't know how much that would be worth going into here just because of the details of it, I mean.
Okay.
Because, but to give maybe a kind of idea is that I think that the question of how it works specifically was something that a lot of people had. And I think that's why we see, there are schools of Buddhism like the Sarvastivadins, and they said everything in the past and the future both exist. And part of that was actually to explain karma. So they said, like, when you do something now, how does it have an effect in the future? And they said when you do something now, the future result actually already exists, and the mind just connects with that when the present ripens. So it's not actually happening, it's just that the future is already there. And so this was rejected by other schools of Buddhism, by some. But there's actually a very popular school of Buddhism, actually much, I believe much more popular than the Sri Lankan Buddhism, because it was in India, large parts of India. And then other schools had other ideas. And I know that the Theravada view is more like a kind of stream of sort of every occurrence of our mind. It's kind of conditioning and shaping the next, and it's more linear, you could say, in that way, rather than kind of everything everywhere all at once. But yeah, I think that when the Buddha talked about it, at least he's more talking about this general pattern that when the mind does good things, our choices, they shape our mind, and our mind, it will kind of go according to those choices naturally by these inclinations, like maybe Ajahn was kind of alluding to some degree. I think that, if we do, when we do bad things on an intuitive level, maybe not consciously, but I think that the Buddha is pointing to the fact that the mind, the way that the mind works, which doesn't necessarily have an explanation, I think it's more just this is how it is. It's that's how it works. When you do painful things to other people intentionally, it kind of causes this thorn inside, and the mind it just knows that, and we feel that. And I think that's part of why, for example, someone who maybe does very bad deeds for a long time, and maybe we don't think that they really feel the guilt of it, but then they can repent later in life, and it's almost like facing all that suffering, it all comes flooding in, because really it was there all the time. It's just that we can repress it. And so I assume that also the death process is probably a time of all these things really coming up and really coming face to face with our choices and decisions, and the mind kind of knowing where to go accordingly, almost like a self-inflicted kind of system, you could say, of results.
There's one term I've heard of I've only encountered kind of tangentially to what I've studied, the concept of the karma storehouse.
Ah, yes.
Okay, so that rings a bell with you. I wonder if you know, if I understood correctly, it was basically like there's a storehouse. Is it a storehouse of actions or results within the heart, or what was that? Do you happen to know?
Well, yes.
So I'm out of my depth. So.
Yeah, that's it. They call it the Alya Vijnana, sometimes called the storehouse consciousness.
Source conscious, right? Okay.
It's actually a teaching
Right.
of they call it. They have a list of 8 consciousnesses. So usually we talk about 6 consciousnesses, and other schools of Buddhism they talk about 8. So it's actually different from the mind consciousness, and it's the 8th one. And they say that this is a consciousness. This is found in a lot of Chinese Buddhism, for example. It was a teaching from the Yogacara school, which was a school that mixed with kind of a Mahayana school of Buddhism, you could say. And they had this idea that there was a consciousness which is like a storehouse for all the seeds. Whenever you do an action, it's like a kind of subconscious, maybe, is a sort of Western equivalent. And when the time comes, that will ripen. Actually, the way that they talk about it is that every consciousness we experience is actually the ripening from the storehouse.
Okay.
So everything we're experiencing in this system is actually the fruits that are coming out of this storehouse consciousness, which is where everything is kind of under, and then when it ripens, it's what we experience. That's how they kind of...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. There's an aspect of merit that Ajahn Thanisaro wrote about, Thanisaro Bhikkhu, in his book, The Wings to Awakening, I think it was. He was talking about how our karma has an effect in the present that we see. Then there's an effect later on. So it has these kind of two, it simultaneously brings about multiple consequences. So for example, if we kill someone, for example, I was using that example earlier, we might get caught and thrown in jail, for example. And so there's an immediate consequence we see now. But by the Buddha's teachings, it's actually quite normal that then there would be a much later consequence as well. So, for example, when you pass away, then you'd be reborn in the lower realms. It is quite possible if you kill a human being, even in hell. And so it's another aspect of how merit works. We can see some results right now. And the Buddha used to point this out to people in the suttas. He said, for example, you may not know whether there's a future life, and you may not know if actions really have consequences that take place far in the future, where you can't see the connection. But you can see right here now that if you don't steal, then you're much less likely to go to jail for stealing. And so it's very pragmatic in that way. And he drew his listeners to attention to that as well. It's an important thing to be aware of, and to at least have that kind of faith and understanding in cause and effect relationships, and try to learn from those.
I wonder, Ajahn, if I could add one more thing to this.
Sure.
I do think that maybe it's worth also pointing out when these types of questions come up that sometimes maybe it's a point of confusion, like, oh, does this really make any sense at all? But I think it's also worth maybe applying this if we ask the same question, like, how does gravity work? And it's, of course, there's you could say a deeper investigation of gravity, but when it really boils down to it, we ask, well, why is it like that? We don't have an answer either. It's just how it is. So the Buddha, he's not saying why is it this way. He's really not concerned with that type of question. He's really just saying this is how it is, and this is how you can work with it to be free from suffering. Kind of like it doesn't matter why gravity is the way it is. We can study it so that we know that how to build planes that don't crash, right? So it's not really important to ask why, and in fact, that can distract us from building the airplanes effectively. And so I think that maybe that's relevant to this type of question, Christine. I don't know for you or maybe other people, but I feel like that's something that's worth at least saying. So that sometimes maybe people, personality types, have a tendency to get stuck on these types of points. So that just comes to mind.
All right.
Okay. We have a question, I believe, from Torah.
Okay.
Thai Kukri says, when do you think a soul develops in a newborn?
Oh. Well, so I don't know, I have to say. My understanding is that according to Theravada Buddhism, that we use the word soul. We actually, in English, we don't usually use the word soul, although personally I'm not opposed to it, I have to admit. But in any case, we talk about maybe the mind or consciousness or the heart, that it must. We were actually just talking about this this evening here at the monastery, and Iowata had great information from the sutras about this. That that when a child is conceived, that it's the union not only of the mother and the father, but also of the consciousness of the newborn. So that so it's there from the very start, as soon as there's conception. I wonder if you think it'd be worthwhile to add any things you're mentioning at tea about this as well.
Okay.
If you want, yeah,
Sure.
it's up to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I do think that this is a controversial point, and I wouldn't want to claim to know about it. And I do think that the suttas are, there's room for ambiguity there in terms of the details of the timing. I know that this comes up with monks and other people asking questions and for different reasons, and yeah, so I wouldn't claim to have an opinion or a kind of knowledge or anything about that. But yeah, the suttas are very clear that yes, the Buddha. There's a question from the Buddha in Ananda in the Mahanidana Sutta, that's in the Digha Nikaya, and the Buddha is essentially explaining how, in order for someone to be born, there has to be consciousness within the womb of the mother, and so it's clear that it's not that beings are, and then also development process. So we know that you could say, according to the suttas, the Mahanidana Sutta, the development of a child before it's born consciousness must be present for that to happen. I think the question that people have is just when exactly is that starting point? Maybe 9 months is probably, we can safely assume, yes, that's gone through development, a sufficient amount of development, but it's a question of exactly when and so on. And so yeah, that I wouldn't say is really answered, but I do think that the suttas do say quite clearly that in order for there to be a child born, it has to have kind of been developed within the womb first, to some extent.
And so the consciousness must be there at some point while the child is still in the womb.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, and we have a question here from Sud. Says, is anger a form of delusion that stems from Sakaya Ditti? Or do you think anger is a kind of tendency to be harmful?
Okay, well, I would say closer to the second. If we think of anger as the Pali word dosa, and think of delusion as the Pali word moha, these are actually listed as separate things in the suttas. Anyway, so we have the three roots of unskillful action as being lobha, dosa, and moha. And lobha meaning greed. And it's actually quite a wide category of any kind of liking or wanting with regard to unwholesome things like sensual pleasures, as I was saying earlier, or pleasures of becoming or non-becoming. And then dosa being aversion, anger being just one kind, in this broad category of disliking, like hatred, anxiety, fear, or anger, or annoyance even. And then moha is delusion. So it's actually got its own mention, its own separate kind of category. And this is not really understanding how things work, not being presently aware in the present moment also, these kinds of things. And so it says, so the way it works is that is if we're not clearly aware in the present with mindfulness, then the heart is clouded by delusion. And then with delusion in the heart misperceives its sensory experience, whether it's things that it experiences through the external senses, like sights or sounds, or physical sensations, for example, or even things internally and through the mind door of perception, such as memories or thoughts and so on like this. It misperceives them, and then it generates either liking or disliking. So that would be the lobha or dosa, also called, as I was saying earlier, greed or aversion, because there are different translations. So delusion is present, and then that's a condition for one of the others to arise. But if we're clearly mindful in the present, then delusion is displaced by the mindfulness, and we clearly know things, and we perceive them accurately, and the heart doesn't initiate either of any of these other unskillful routes of action. There we go. So when we're angry, delusion is there. That's the thing. And when we're angry, delusion is there, and so the two are definitely related. And anger depends on delusion. And this is, I think, an interesting reflection. When we get angry, no matter how right it seems, if we remember, if we have faith in this teaching from Buddhism, that actually this delusion definitely is present, and that may make us think again about how right it seems to be angry, and whatever the anger is telling us to do. And I think, of course, we've all probably had this experience that when we were angry, we thought it was so right to do such and such a thing. And then when we calmed down and later reflected on it in a cooler moment, we said, oh boy, that really wasn't the right thing to do. And so, there you go, yeah. That's what I can offer on that suit.
Okay. Omika has a kind comment here.
Yes.
Thanks for all Dhamma talks, so much to learn and so many blessings. Sadhu. Sadhu to your listening, Bhumika.
Good.
Okay, and Richard has a question. You've just mentioned a difference between hatred and cruelty. That one is cruel not because of anger, but because of a pleasure in that. Could you elaborate, please? Thanks.
Sure.
Just your comment, Arjun.
Sure, yes, I was talking about sama sankappa, right thought, or like inclination of mind. I was just, so there are three kinds of these in the suttas: non-greed, non-ill will, and non-cruelty. And my understanding is that the difference between ill will, like being angry at someone and wishing them, is actually more on the side of like being angry at them and wanting to hurt them because you're angry. Maybe that's a good clarification. It's you wish them ill because of really negative feelings towards them. You know what I mean? That probably wasn't clear about that. Whereas cruelty is more about not really necessarily that you have anything against a person or being that you want to harm, but it's just that you want to harm them, kind of even for fun, or because you like to hurt people, that kind of thing. So one example, if it comes to mind, that's something I like to think about. But for example, once I was reading a story about a man who he was holding a mouse by the tail over an open fire, to hurt it, but not because he really had anything against the mouse or anything like this, but just he liked to hurt mice. He liked to hurt people and animals, and so that kind of thing. That would be cruelty, and that would be doing something like that. For example, holding a mouse over an open fire to hurt it, to burn it is very bad karma. And so the Buddha saw that in his practice that greed, ill will, and cruelty lead to his harm, And so he tried to stamp out these kinds of thoughts, and that's what he recommended to his disciples.
Okay, here we go. It says, Ajahn, can you talk about how we can know our limitations and not be tricked by delusion? Recently, I drove to doctor's appointments and was so wiped out afterwards that I was dangerous to drive home.
Oh, yeah.
It was dangerous to drive home.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing limitations, not being tricked by delusion.
Sure. So I think that, in my own life, I've sometimes done this. I think probably everyone has at some point or other, overextended themselves. And I think a key thing there is simply remembering, having the mindfulness to notice when it's happening, and you clearly are aware of what happened. Having that mindfulness, and then making a determination to be aware in the future and try to remember this, can make a big difference, and we learn over time. And look into what are all the things that the conditions that led us to do this kind of thing, so that next time we can identify these patterns that we have, or we learn about our own personalities, what kinds of decisions we tend to make, and how we do things, and then with this mindfulness make different choices. I think one thing also is to notice if we're just if we get caught up in circumstances. This is one kind of thing that can happen. We get caught up in doing things, and get attached to certain results and doing certain things, then one thing can lead to another. And it's important to have this mindfulness about, what am I doing and what are the consequences, and not getting carried away by life, not getting caught up in things that are going on and caught up in things that we're doing, but having a bit of calm, and mindfulness and circumspection about what's happening. So that when we find ourselves doing this to ourselves again, and then regretting it and saying, boy, why did I do that again? I should have known better. Those are some ideas I have. I wonder if you have any ideas I have.
Okay.
Overextending ourselves.
Extending?
I feel what I said was kind of
think
basic, but nothing more jumping to mind.
Nothing's coming to mind in this,
Okay.
in this moment.
So maybe if we have more thoughts on that, Rick, maybe we'll mention them later in the evening.
Circle back, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we have a question here. How does one deal with severe self-doubt and insecurity around the opposite sex?
Okay. A great question. Yes. I'm not sure I know exactly what you mean, but perhaps what you mean is especially in relation to romantic affairs. I think is a context in which this commonly comes up. I think all of us, for example, have some fear of rejection. From others, and in many circumstances, not only around the opposite sex with regard to romantic affairs, but also, for example, if we're going to a job interview or something like that, we may be afraid to go into a job interview because we're afraid of being rejected. I think many of us have had that sinking feeling in the middle of an interview, and you realize, I'm not going to get this job. This person doesn't like me, or something like that, and it's a terrible feeling. This kind of thing. And so, if we can have some self-confidence in these kinds of situations, in a variety of situations, including in regard to interacting with the opposite sex in romantic affairs, then this helps a lot. And if we are self-doubting and insecure, this in and of itself could be a reason that someone could be disinterested in being in a relationship with us. Unfortunately, this can cause kind of a negative cycle. So I think one thing to do is to reflect on your goodness. Actually take the time to mindfully reflect on your own goodness. I think there must certainly be some goodness in you that you've come to this, and you're interested in learning about these kinds of things, spirituality and religion and so on. And so that's something you can reflect on right there, that you have an interest in this area. And there are many people in the world who would like to have friends and to have partners who are interested in religion and spirituality, in which that there are more people like that in the world. And so that's something right there. And if you also reflect on, what kind of morality you keep, what kind of ethics you have, and your principles, and reflect that it's a special thing to have ethical and moral principles in life. For example, if you live by the principle of not just to pick one, and I don't know what your principles are and your ethics are, and so you could translate this into your own ethics. But you think, for example, that you live by the principle of not stealing. And some people may take this for granted, but in fact, actually, that is special, that there are many people in the world who do steal, or wouldn't hesitate to steal if a good opportunity came along. And so this is a very special thing, actually, to live by the principle of not stealing. This is just one example. You can also reflect on your acts of generosity and service to others. When you give gifts or help others, in any way, whether it's family members or friends or even people you don't know, and this kind of thing. And these are actually meditation techniques that we have from the suttas. That's reflecting on our generosity and our morality. You can also think about if you meditate, for example, maybe you're a meditator if you're here and you're interested in Buddhism. Is sit down and take some time to reflect on these things. This is one of the, or these are some of the inspiring themes, as they're called in Theravada Buddhism. They inspire the heart and they uplift the heart. And we can see from doing this that there is goodness within us. This can build up our own self-confidence. Keeping the 5 precepts is specifically mentioned in regard to self-confidence in the suttas. The Buddha says that one who keeps the 5 precepts will be confident in any group of people, whatsoever. Keeping the 5 precepts brings kind of an internal strength and internal dignity, to the heart. And so, in addition to reflecting on our own goodness, you might want to consider undertaking the 5 precepts and seeing if this does instill a sense of inner strength, and self-confidence for you, as promised in the Buddhist teachings. I think something else to think about is, it's natural for living beings to seek partners in life. Friendships and romantic relationships. And while we might not see what would be attractive to us in a romantic relationship with others, that they will see these kinds of things, and so you could, and if you can have some more self-confidence and in interacting with other people, I think you'll start seeing positive results very quickly. You'll start getting some validation. And so try to have some courage, and step forward, and everything takes practice. So even if you do have difficulties at first, just take it as practice in the beginning, and then that'll change your mindset as well. You're practicing, and it's natural when you're practicing that things won't always go as you want them to, but you just keep trying, and with determination, you'll definitely succeed in the long run. Some ideas.
Okay, we have a question here from Sud. Can you please teach us about what are some of the benefits of donating during Katina ceremony? I see that it is made into a special occasion. I always thought perhaps this is to encourage donating in the lay community and to be exposed to the Dhamma, but was wondering if there is any other benefit elaborated by the Buddha or Buddhist tradition.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Well, certainly, yes. These are benefits, right? That by making an allowance for a specific ceremony of generosity, then it kind of highlights the opportunity for the laity, and so in that way is encouraging, to the lay community to to make offerings, and it is common, it's normal actually that at a katina ceremony that also a Dhamma talk will be given, and so it'll certainly be an opportunity to hear Dhamma as well. Of course, as you know, in the Buddhist teachings, we have the concept of merit, and that it'll bring material benefits to us in the future if we give, and also that will develop our parami of generosity. Every time we give a gift, then our generosity parami grows stronger. It's interesting in the Theravada tradition. I've been told that in the Theravada tradition, at least in some countries, this is considered to be the best merit-making ceremony of all. But actually, I don't know why. Why this gift would have more merit than others. But it's one aspect of it is that it has to be a spontaneous act of giving. So it's not to be initiated by the monastic community. For example, so the katina ceremony is only held if a lay donor wants to sponsor it and say they want to offer a katina. And it's said in the Abhidhamma that one of the characteristics of a very skillful mindset when doing good karma is to be spontaneous. So not instigated by somebody else, something like that. To be spontaneous. And so perhaps this aspect of katina is one reason that it's especially meritorious to have a katina ceremony. People also find the katina ceremony kind of a heartwarming occasion because it comes after the rains residence, the annual wasa. And so the monastic community that's there has been there for 3 months, very stable. And none of the monks leaving for any extended periods of time. There are reasons why they might be able to leave for short periods of time in unusual circumstances. And so the monastic community and the lay community have gotten to know each other to some extent or other during this time period. And so it's an opportunity for the laity also to show their gratitude for the presence of the monastics there. It's one reason it's kind of a heartwarming occasion also. And this can bring up very good feelings. And so it says in the suttas that if you can give with many different kinds of mindsets. You can give with the mindset of hoping that someone will give you something in return, for example. Or you could give with making a determination that you'd like to be reborn in a higher realm, for example, or be reborn wealthy in your next life. These kinds of benefits of generosity. Or you can give with loving kindness. And this is kind of a higher mindset that brings you extolled by the Buddha. And so you can see how if there's this relationship between the laity and the monastic community, then there might be some giving with some kindness, some loving kindness also, and some goodwill. But the very highest mindset, of course, is that we think when giving that by making this gift, it will make my mind more noble and more beautiful. And perhaps it has a tendency to call this up when we make a gift on katina, thinking that we're doing this in support of the religion, and this is very specifically a religious event. And so maybe some people will have this thought arise in their minds. They're doing this as very specifically as a spiritual practice to develop themselves. So there's some ideas that I have about that.
Okay, and we have a question from Ulises. How can one become a Buddha? Is it possible for a layperson?
Okay, great question. Wonderful question. How can one become a Buddha? So, in the broadest sense, the term Buddha simply means one who is awake. So it could be applied to any enlightened person. But I suspect, and I hope you'll forgive me if I'm wrong, but I suspect what you may mean is more commonly we refer to as Samma Sambuddha, a rightly self-awakened one, as a Buddha. And in Theravada Buddhism, we typically refer to the Gautama Buddha, the Buddha of our history, who passed away about 2,500 years ago, and started this religion for us. And how does one become a Samma Sambuddha like him? And the way to do it is that you develop your spiritual parami. Your parami is a word from the Pali, the language of our scriptures, the Theravada Buddhism, and the commentarial traditions that grew up afterwards. And it's most, as I understand it, it's most exactly translated as perfections. And what this means is our spiritual virtues inside, of which there are 10 in the Theravadan tradition, beginning with generosity. And according to the story in the Theravadan tradition, the way the Gautama Buddha became the Sama Sambuddha was that in a distant past life he was a very accomplished meditator. He was living as a hermit, and he was practicing meditation so well that he could actually fly. So he was already very spiritually developed, and he met a Sama Sambuddha named the Dipankara Buddha. And he was so impressed by the Dipankara Buddha that he made the aspiration. He says, I want to be just like you. And the Dipankara Buddha looked at him, and he told him in the future he will be. He made a prediction based on his insight into the character of this person who was at that time known as Sumedha, which means the wise one. He actually made this prediction that he would be a Sama Sambuddha in the future. And this is another necessary component, they say, according to tradition, to become a Sama Sambuddha. You have to be very spiritually advanced already and meet a Sama Sambuddha and get a prediction from him that you will attain the same in the future. And then from that point forward, you have to develop these perfections, these spiritual virtues, over a very long period of time, through many lifetimes. They say that in Thailand, they say that where the staple food is rice. In Thailand, the staple food is rice. So Thai people eat rice every meal, or almost every meal. They say that if you consider the number of rice grains you consume over an entire lifetime, this does not equal the number of lifetimes that you have to strive in developing your spiritual virtues to become a Sama Sambuddha. And so the bodhisattva, as they call them, the bodhisattva is one who is striving to develop these virtues to become a Buddha. He had to develop these virtues over a great length of time, and then he was reborn as a prince. And they say typically that the bodhisattvas in their last lives are reborn into a relatively high level of society, very fortunate rebirth. And then he learned about old age, disease, and death for the first time. And this so moved him that he decided to leave home and leave his kingdom, leave his the possibility of becoming a king, and undertake the life of a religious seeker. And he strove for 6 years in various religious practices, trying to find what is the way to get out of old age, disease, and death. How do you get out of the round of rebirths and out of suffering? And he had to find this for himself, because at that time there was no Buddha and there was no Buddhist religion. And this is one aspect of becoming a Sama Sambuddha. A Sama Sambuddha arises in the world when the teachings are no longer with us. And so he has to find it on his own, the way to enlightenment. And so the Buddha Gautama, he strove for 6 years through various ascetic practices and different meditation styles, to some extent really torturing himself through various practices, trying to find out what is the way to attain enlightenment, before finally finding the Noble Eightfold Path through his own efforts in attaining enlightenment and then establishing the Buddhist religion. And so this is how you become a Sama Sambuddha. This is how you become the Buddha in the future. And it is something that basically we all have the raw materials to do, because we all have these spiritual virtues within us to some extent or other. They're virtues like generosity and patient endurance, loving kindness and equanimity, just to name some of them. Renunciation is another one. Honesty and morality, these are another couple of these spiritual virtues. And so you can study what these spiritual virtues are and learn how to develop these and how to practice these. And slowly over time, you become stronger and more developed inside. You begin seeing results right in this life, whether you're in the householder life as a layperson, or if you join the monastic life to continue practicing. And you make the solemn determination in the future, I want to be a Sammasambuddha, just like the Buddha of our history. And I want to, out of compassion for all living beings, I want to find the way to enlightenment when the way to enlightenment is not known, so that I can share this way to enlightenment with other living beings, so that they can save themselves as well. And yeah, however far you take it, I hope you find this kind of practice rewarding if you decide to undertake it.
Do you want to be a Sammasambuddha Ajahn?
I think I'd rather try to attain enlightenment sooner. But I find it very inspiring. There are people in the world who want to attain Sammasambuddha and benefit so many living beings. So.
Okay, now we have a question from Jonathan. Let's take a look here. Oh wow, there's questions. Okay. Not so many, but probably won't get through all of them. Apologies.
We'll see.
Do you believe in the I am? If I say I am Buddha, do you believe I inherit his passive spirit? If I work, do you believe I inherit his active spirit that works in our bodies?
Okay, question continued below.
Okay, John says, you are a Buddha, is he in you?
Okay.
No, John?
Wow, what a great question. This is great. Okay. Do you believe in the I am? If I say I am Buddha, do you believe I inherit his passive spirit? If I work, do you believe I inherit his active spirit that works in our bodies? You are a Buddha. Is he in you? Okay. So meaning that if you make the statement, just as you might make the statement, I am Buddha, or if you're working, or if you make the statement, you are a Buddha, is he in you? Okay. That's how I understand this question. Okay, these questions. Yeah. So, this is you probably get many different kinds of answers to this from different people, different Buddhists, including Theravadan Buddhists. I'm most familiar with Theravadan Buddhism. I ordained in Thailand, in Theravadan country, but there also are Mahayana influences there as well. And so you ask about what we believe, and so I wonder, yeah, maybe I'll tell you what I believe. You see, according to meditation masters of Thailand, I can't speak for all of them, but it's a common teaching amongst meditation masters in Thailand that once an enlightened being goes to nibbana or nirvana, that then they become unlimited, and they can come back to samsara to help beings that they have a connection with through karma, through interacting with them in the past. And this could be controversial, depending. So some Buddhists believe in this and some don't, but this is a teaching of the meditation masters, or at least some of them in Thailand. And so they don't just leave us behind. And so if you have a connection through karma with a Buddha, then and if you request his or her help, the help of an enlightened being, whether it's an arahant or a sammasambuddha or pacceka Buddha, then they can help you with spiritual support or perhaps other ways. And so this is something that I believe in. Actually, that's what I can say that I believe in. Wonder if you'd be willing to give an answer. It's up to you. You don't have to.
Well, maybe we could get through the other questions as well.
Okay, sure. There are a lot of other questions. That's right.
This
There are a lot
one's
of
a
other
little
questions.
bit complicated. We could probably take it from so many different angles, as you said.
Okay. Right.
Okay, here's one from Mariah. Looks like very practical. When I try to keep the 8 precepts, I struggle with not eating after noon. How can I work through this? It is difficult to deny myself food when I feel hungry, especially when there is food on hand.
Yes, right. Especially when there's food on hand, right. Well, Anumotana, trying to keep the 8 precepts, that's such a wonderful practice. We actually did a reaffirmation ceremony for the 8 precepts today, because today we're observing the Uposita day. as it being a new moon. Different monasteries in different countries will have different exact days that they observe the new moon on, but today, the empty cloud, we're observing it today. And so we have a ceremony for undertaking or re-undertaking or reaffirming the 8 precepts for a Machi. We're very fortunate to have with us today an 8 precept nun, as well as some lay guests who are staying here. And yes, not eating past midday can be challenging for many of us. One thing that can be very useful is not being around food. Putting it, that's something right there, and you notice that it's especially difficult when you have food around, or when you're in the presence of food. And I wonder about the circumstances in which you're trying to keep the 8 precepts. I don't know if you try to keep it every day or just on an Uposita day. It says in the suttas, the Buddha recommended keeping the 8 precepts on the Uposita day, which is how they kept the calendar in ancient India, but you can do it one day a week, basically, is what it works out to, as an integral part of the lay path, and devote that day to spiritual practice. If you're doing it one day a week like that, then you may want to consider, what day can I do it on, and in what circumstances can I do it where I'm less likely to run into things that cause me problems in keeping the precepts. So that's one thing. Another thing is you can reflect that this in and of itself is a precept in renunciation and working with the desire, the desire for food. And also it can be a practice in patience, because desire, there can be desire for eating on the one hand. On the other hand, there really is the physical reality of food. Of hunger, rather, sorry. The physical reality of hunger, which is part and parcel of being a human being and having a gross physical body, And as long as we're in the round of rebirths, we're liable to experiencing hunger, this form of suffering. And so being able to work with suffering and deal with suffering, and even just endure suffering, it can be quite an important and valuable skill in life, And you can reflect, as we were talking earlier, about the spiritual virtues, making us stronger inside. That every time you simply endure being hungry and don't break a precept, you're growing stronger in your spiritual virtue of endurance and patience. That will help you in any circumstance in life where you need to be patient. And also you're growing in your spiritual virtue of self-control, or sila. It's also its own spiritual virtue, or parami. If you're able to meditate while you're experiencing this, then this can make it much easier to deal with. And so you can actually be aware in your meditation of the physical sensations of hunger. But just like you might be aware of pain in the knees, for example, or physical discomfort in the back, or an itch you might experience on the skin, the physical experience of hunger is one that you can observe with mindfulness. And so it can be helpful to do the 8 precepts when you have an opportunity to engage in spiritual practice also. And then if you can do that and just be aware of the physical discomfort in and of itself as it is, the heart can see that this is just a physical sensation. It's impermanent and ever changing. And in fact, we won't die, or something like that. As long as we can eat at other times, we're not going to die. And so we'll get through this and we'll be okay. And eventually the hunger will go away. It's remarkable how the emotions subside. And we can actually feel quite good and light inside in the presence of hunger even to the extent that we don't miss eating. We don't miss eating past midday anymore. And we feel quite good to be engaging in spiritual practice instead. And there's some ideas I can offer. I wonder if you have any other ideas. Not having eaten past midday, what's it been now? Over 1.5 years at least since you came into the monastery. I wonder if you also have any other tips you could offer.
Well, yeah, I know it can be difficult. As a layperson, sometimes I would take a kind of light determination, or sometimes feel tempted to eat later and so on. And I think that...
I've got 2 more. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think maybe one thing is just making sure that you are actually eating enough. That can help. Because if you do that, even psychologically, telling yourself, I've been sufficiently nourished for today. Right? I've been sufficiently nourished. And so I don't need to worry about that. I don't need to... That way there's no kind of maybe extra justification coming up. That can sometimes be there. And that might just be helpful to kind of reinforce your determination to think, I'm good. I've really eaten enough. So when the time does come around, that could be something. And yeah, I think the advice of also being, Ajahn gave of being aware of your surroundings is helpful too. Like, it depends maybe on also what you're tempted to eat. Like if it's snack foods, that's maybe different from you're tempted to have a whole meal. And I would say that maybe looking at what it is specifically and then trying to help your conditions help because part of it is really community. I think part of why people can keep the eight precepts there's more is because many people are keeping them and they're living in a community. And so to for example, if one of the lay residents here snuck into the pantry and made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it would be quite embarrassing, and it would be, because everyone would, maybe not everyone would find out, but they would know that everyone else is not doing that, and everyone is expected not to be doing that, and everyone has determined not to do that, and they're doing it, and so there's really this social pressure. And so maybe if you could even find like a group of friends, or maybe an online group, where you decide to keep the uposatha together. And that can really help you because then okay, if I break this, well then everyone else is doing it but not me.
Right.
And that could help because sometimes it's the social dimension. And then maybe once you build that determination, then you'll be able to do it better on your own, right? And then another thing that comes up is also related to what Ajahn was saying with developing meditation, but especially developing some nourishment and joy in your meditation if you can. Because I think part of it is, maybe boredom, and we want to be distracted. And so kind of maybe doing some loving kindness meditation or any kind of meditation that makes you feel very happy and peaceful. That way if you're developing that, like if you're taking the 8 precepts, hopefully you also are dedicating more time to actual maybe meditation or at least very focused practice in some way. And so hopefully that time that you spend focusing on your practice, you'll have more time to develop more peace and joy and calm. And then you'll be less tempted, hopefully, to go for the food. And so you'll have more fortitude inside when that temptation arises. And you maybe will have less of a kind of pull towards it. And also reflecting on, by indulging in this desire, it'll actually destroy the peace that you've developed. That's something that you might maybe have noticed in your practice, that there's a kind of the pull towards the mind, towards sensuality, that will pull you away from any kind of internal peace you've developed. And it will kind of crush it. It'll make it crumble. So you can say, if you develop a little bit of peace and joy and nourishment, then if you want to protect that, then you'll kind of protect the mind. And that will be more easy, instead of sort of like trying to grunt through it and sort of force yourself to endure.
Great ideas. You mentioned online community or a group of friends, and of course, maybe you mentioned this, I missed it. Maybe if you go into a monastery or a meditation center and you're there in the evening, you'll be engaged in other activities, and nobody will be, depending on, in monasteries anyway, typically there won't be eating going on. I guess it depends on the monastery and the tradition and so on like this, but if you can go to a place like that, then you'll be doing engaging in spiritual activities instead, and so you may not be so tempted to think about eating. Another thing you can do, a technique that some fasters use, people who are fasting, is they'll drink quite a lot of water. They put a lot of water in the stomach, and so this calms the hunger pains. Another technique is when doing the precepts in the evenings, you could typically take some sugars or some oil. For example, the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis have this allowance. That if we're weak from hunger, for example, so if you're experiencing even, for example, like low blood sugar levels, you have maybe a cup of tea with some honey in it or some sugar in it, and this can help quite a bit. Yeah, that's one idea. Yeah. Another idea, a few more ideas.
And I noticed, Ajahn, that we are over time.
Over time, yeah.
Looks like it's...
It seems to happen whenever I do more chat. Yeah.
It's okay. It's all good, right? Hopefully beneficial to everyone.
A bit long-winded.
Yes, Mary just let us know, FYI. They're calling the bell on us here. Oh, and also, just to close up, I know we're going to go over Mary, I'm sorry. Moraz says, yes, I have an online group, and we all keep the 8 precepts on Saturdays. Sadhu. Very nice. Wonderful.
Well, did we answer everyone's questions, though?
Oh, we did not.
Not that we have to. We didn't make any commitment we'd answer everyone's questions because we do have time limits, of course. But just out of curiosity, so we didn't actually.
We did not. No, there was still some more. Not too many more. Unfortunately, it looks like John had a question and get to him.
Okay. So, yes, so
Uh,
we're running over time, and our lay guests are here. They have to be up for morning puja at 5:30 tomorrow morning, and so we should probably call it a night. Apologies to everyone who didn't get their questions answered. And maybe you can save them for next time. We're doing monk chat every Friday night here, of course. And maybe I'll mention also we have the in-person teaching events, the live teaching events, Saturday evening from 6 to 7:30 here at Empty Cloud, and also Sunday from 1 to 4. Sunday we also have volunteer opportunities in the morning, as early as 8 a.m. if you'd like to come for that and help out around the monastery. And then anyone who would like to make food offerings, of course, as always, on the weekends we do start the meal proceedings at 11 o'clock in the morning, and so if you'd like to make offerings, please come by 10:30 or 10:45 to participate in that. And Anumotana, everyone, your practice and your learning, and I hope you continue to prosper in the Dhamma. And until next time, have a good night.
Sadhu.